All right, we are back. We are done with the first stage of the major, and that was honestly a bit of a roller coaster of emotions. Having watched those teams play, watching our Pickems all go down the toilet. If any of you got 5 points, I'm sorry, you're a bad analyst. Like, I just have to say it. There's no one who could have predicted these exact outcomes. So if you got 10 out of 10, good luck. Go play the lottery. But it was a bit of a travesty for us on the Pick'em side. Not so much our actual picks, though. We both got 2 out of 4, which, considering the crapshoot that these events can be, I'd say it's not too bad. I'm actually okay with it. And my fantasy team on HLTV did pretty well. So, ups and downs, swings and roundabouts. At least now we get on to the best part of the major, the actual group stage. It starts now. And we've got a lot of good teams to talk about, and also some interesting picks to make. So I think we should just dive straight into it. Not bother with any more prefacing or any more dilly-dallying. I'm going to take the first pick, as is my right, and I've taken the clear and obvious choice, Spirit. I don't think there's too much I need to really say, do I? They've been pretty impressive. They won Katowice. They made it through the Blast Showdown as well, just in between, which is a thing that happened. And now we're here, and I'm pretty sure there's still the betting odds to make the major final and win it. Donk's amazing, great supporting cast. Shiro is still somehow unheralded and unnoticed in this roster, and I think Chopper's a decent enough IGL to make these pieces work. So that's my pick to win the major. Pretty simple. YouM3, firstly, welcome back, and secondly, any thoughts on Spirit?
Yeah, I mean, first off, great to be back. Second off, I hate this. Like every time we have a chance to pick Spirit, you happen to have the first pick. I'm onto your tricks. Yeah, I mean this team cooks. I love Donk as well. I'll play devil's advocate here. He had a lower than a 1.7 rating at the Copenhagen at the RMR and at the showdown. Concerns, has Donk fallen off? He's already reached his peak.
He was garbage the entire time.
I know. A 1
Oh,
point I
wow.
can't it's not enough.
I'm going to pick up, just going to really just look up these exact stats, because, oh my god, a 1.24 at the RMRB, that's terrible.
It's pretty
Terrible.
bad.
And a 1.53 in the showdown? Ugh. Who is this guy? I mean, they need to cut him and bring in a real rifler, like Kios. Now that's an improvement. Clearly this Donk kid is garbage, and they need to make some changes. But yeah, obviously, realistically, how can you be mad about this pick? Like, no one can be mad about this pick. If you get to pick him, you're going to pick him every time, aren't you?
Yeah, just about. I mean, they're the team that's favorited to make the major, almost, or win the major rather, just because of form and the talent that they have on this roster. Like you said, sure, weirdly flies under the radar still, even though he's putting up good numbers on the AWP. It's just it just eclipses everybody because of one, he plays like an aggressive, very fun to watch play style, and the fact that he's able to sort of back it with good numbers. So just between Shiro, Zontix, and Donk, I don't think you can really go wrong with either any of these three. And the Magic can sometimes just clutch around for you. So
Yeah.
I do love that about this team. So yeah, I'm annoyed, but yeah, Spirit's a solid pick.
Yeah, the Shiro thing's always interesting to me, because it's always been more of that sort of cleanup. Like, he made his name on the Gambit Cloud9 roster because he was winning clutches. Like, he was one of the few players back when this was possible to hit like 100 clutches in a calendar year. It's actually insane to do that. The players who've done it is like Zipex in his best year, Simple when he had the God tier year where he had like a 1.35 rating, had like 20% opening attempt rate and all those clutches. It was one of the most ridiculous years. Shiro's one of the few people in that sort of 100 clutch club. So it has to be said that he's usually going to be finishing things off. But when you've got a guy smashing everything to pieces, the pieces are so small that you don't even need the sweeper to clean up the dust. It's already gone. It's just vaporized. So I think he'll get his credit if they make it into a tough playoff series and all of a sudden Donk can't just smash everything down. The openings aren't coming through, and they do need a lot more clutch work, like talking 1v3s, 1v4s potentially. That's where we remember Shiro. That's the clutches we know him for. And at that point, all of a sudden, these guys are stacked. We forgot they had Shiro.
Yeah, I think the cool thing about Shiro joining this team in the first place is that it just looks like he's able to play at such a totally his own pace, which is I think one of the reasons I was critical, and I'm still critical of this Cloud9 team, is I felt like Shiro and Axile were kind of a part of the problem for the old Nafany in-game leading system, where I feel like they actually wanted to play the Nafany system, or they wanted to play that very sporadic, chaotic, not flashing for each other, just like playing at their own rhythm, and then try and pull something together in a late round, which very infrequently worked because not everybody's on the
Yeah.
same page and everybody's a little off tempo. So I feel like this works for Shiro a lot because he's definitely mechanically able to hang, and then he can just allow the pack to operate, and he can just think about what the next move is afterwards, as opposed to really even having to be a part of like the push into bomb sites, or really like the front runners that are going to trade things out. So yeah, I mean, honestly, Shiro, roster move of the year, and it was all inspired by himself. You know, he benched himself and he was like, "Yeah, you know what, Art Frost, I'm taking your spot, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it."
Yeah, you should get GM of the year at the end of the year awards. That's one hell of a move, and yeah, I'm pretty confident in this pick. So, who have you gone with to counter this? It must be something equally as solid, surely.
I mean, I've gone with Vitality. I feel like the end of last year, we saw good work out of them. I do think they're a little bit here and there so far coming into this year, and I think some of the calling has looked a little scrappy. But I kind of have no doubt that this team just it. I mean, the thing is with this stage is, even though we come out of the opening stage of the major into the elimination stage with a bunch of teams that were really clamoring their way out, and some of the teams that made it in like the 3-1 category definitely didn't have the hardest runs. I do think Vitality are just leagues above a lot of these teams coming up. So I think regardless of their draw, you know, the opening bout, I'm trying to remember who they play in the opening round.
Eternal
Um,
Fire
well, they play Eternal Fire first,
in a best of
and
one.
that, to be fair, could be an Eternal Fire win. And I don't know that I'd lock in Vitality 3-0, but I think for every other draw that they'll have subsequently, they'll be perfectly fine. Like they'll most likely have like a Furia, maybe an Imperial, maybe a G2 on the way, and I think they could beat all those teams very comfortably. I think the only teams that they maybe struggle with are honestly an Eternal Fire, a FaZe, a Spirit, maybe a Mouse, but
Mm-hmm.
that's about as far as I'd extend that.
My biggest issue with Vitality right now, the reason I didn't pick them, even though they are still rated number one in the world, is I just look at their 2024 form, and I think to myself, who have they beaten? And you go down the list, and you realise, fucking no one. It's actually kind of shocking. You think, oh, Astralis? No, they're actually not that good. Falcons fell apart. Isn't really that great a team. They lost to Ents and Heroic in Katowice back-to-back series. Sure, rough opening to an event for anyone, but for the second best team or best team in the world, who as they're currently rated, not impressive. Then the last best of 3 win was in RMRB against Ents, the Polish Ents, after losing to Cloud9. So I think this team, that's a dangerous team to pick. A bogey team. Like, they have on paper all the pedigree, all the players, all the star power to make it through this comfortably. But on current form, they're woeful. So hopefully they've taken, you know, a good amount of time to get back into shape, into their championship level shape that they were showing us just the end of last year. They were the best team in the world, and it wasn't even a question. Even with the looming threat of Donk, which a lot of people underestimated, they still looked comfortably like the best team. So if this is a return to form, perfect pick. If this is more of the same, where pretty much anyone's got a puncher's chance of beating them, even in a series, oh, that's going to be scary. That is scary.
I think they're only going to lose best of ones if they're going to lose anything at all. So
Right.
that's, yeah. I do share some concerns, but I do think like it just didn't feel very me to go with like a mouse pick, or I think
Yeah.
who else could I have picked in the
You could have taken
favorites?
FaZe.
Could have
They
taken
were available.
Navi. Yeah, FaZe were available, but also I've got more faith in ZywOo than I do FaZe. So
That's going to be... Ooh, that's interesting. Okay, because we're going to get into some of the favorites later, but one of the favorites we're going to get into right now, that is FaZe. They are my second favorite pick. And, well, it seems just kind of obvious to me to pick them. They are actually the number one rated team. I don't know how I cocked that up. In my head, it was the other way around between them and Vitality. But no, they are the number one rated team in the world for interesting reasons, because they've not won that much of anything. Like, they've finished top at Blast Premier Groups, so what? Second at Katowice, that's a more impressive run. That's a run we actually want to look at, because if you see the teams they beat G2, they beat Mouse. The only team they lost to, Spirit, twice, my other favourite pick. Perfect. Sure, the roster doesn't look like they're in that championship winning form we saw at the major they did win, but I think Frozen has embedded himself really nicely. He's, he had a bit of time to start up, and now that he's found his feet, or found his footing even, he's just, well, he's frozen again. He's blowing people out the server. So I'm really impressed with this roster. I do think they have a couple vulnerabilities, but typically on the biggest stages, they don't show themselves. Carrigan can outcall some of his underperformances. Rain typically shows up when you really need him to. So I think this team's a lot to make it out the stage, and well, I think we're going to be talking about them again if, well, I'm pretty sure we can make a video for the knockout stages. When we do, they should come up again, because they will be a beast to be reckoned with when it comes to the big stages.
Yeah, I don't know what scheduling is going to look like for that, but yeah, we should hopefully have another chance.
There's a few days between the end of this stage and the knockouts. I did check, so I almost made this like a 2-in-1 video, so I thought I would miss it because of my flight to Copenhagen.
We're going to have to prophesize everything for the next
week. We are good. We are good.
Yeah, no, I mean, FaZe are fine. I like. I mean, first off, the Frozen move was always going to be a slam dunk. I felt like there was always going to be a bit of discomfort. I said it at the start, and I think it's even corroborated by Robson in an interview saying that like Frozen's a more complete player than when he first joined FaZe, and that just kind of elevates the prospects of him joining. It wasn't just like relinking with Robson Carrigan, pulling a star player out of Mouse. It wasn't just that. It was that he had played a bunch of different roles, and he also like feels like more of a sort of independent leader, and probably could be another voice on this team, which I think is perfect for what FaZe need. Yeah, I guess I'd hesitate to pick FaZe because I've been let down. And I think in these sorts of stages where there's so many like lives, I think they almost lose a bit of their intensity, and can sometimes have a bit shyer a performance when it comes to stages like this. Like they almost let their guard down a little bit when they know they've got so many opportunities to bounce back into a bracket or the tournament format, so to speak. So that's when I look at them in the major, when I look at them maybe even in a blast, like I could hesitate to pick them just because there's so many opportunities to come back into the game.
I see what you mean. But then you think about it, the logic you have with Vitality, they won't lose a best of 3, I think applies even like to a greater degree, typically with FaZe. Yeah. And then as well, if I'm having to see, like, let's say the seedings actually should be fine if I'm looking at it. The matchups seem fine. But let's say a big name gets upset too much, and that really throws a wrench in the works. And we end up with FaZe versus, let's say, one of the other top 8 teams that isn't in the top 4. Like, say, a Na'Vi in the best of 3 in the 2-2. Who do I, reckon's going to clutch it up? I feel confident in FaZe. But I also look at their path through, and I think, with this new Dynamite edition of Frozen, I do see them making it out without needing to resort to 3 best of 3s in a row. I see them winning at least one of the best of 1s and having somewhat more comfortable road to the playoffs, because they do look a little more dynamic now. They were getting a bit stale at points at the end of last year and earlier in the Frozen times. They hadn't quite got running. They didn't look quite as good, but they did look really good at Katowice.
I do think a lot of people are going to pick him 3-0. And I do also believe that there will be... I think there's at least a 40% chance that FaZe crumble the 3-0 and people will be upset. I do think they'll make it through. I don't think there's a problem with that. But I will strongly suggest maybe find another 3-0 team.
I would.
Or don't trust me because my Pickems are awful as well. So
True. We say this. We both got 2 out of 10 in the first stage. Not for lack of understanding of the game. It's just exactly who's going to be 3-0 and who's going to be 3-2. Come on. Like, it used to be great, the old system. If you're a decent or half decent analyst, knows the scene, I know who's going to go through. Like, generally, I can get 5 out of 10 if I'm picking 7 teams to go through. But if I'm having to pick exact 3-0s for 2 teams, that's we're starting to get silly.
I do think it is a fun system, like every pick mattering, so to speak, because people just throw away their 3-0 pick. But now you actually have to get everything right. So I don't hate it, but also it sucks for me because I apparently suck at it. So You know, I like that it's a little bit more like it matters a bit more, but I think there were quite a few upsets in that opening round, and I think some of that, I mean, most of that won't transfer over into this next stage. Um, I don't know if I can really, without cracking a smile, call it the elimination stage because every part of the tournament is an elimination stage. So
Oh yeah, I have called it the major group stage in the graphic. Like, I
yeah,
think it's a
good.
silly
Yeah.
name to call it the elimination
You're gonna need to
stage.
put it in like one of those tags, being like elimination stage, just because that's what they've called it for some reason.
Yeah, we'll see. I've stopped using. I'm not going to get
Hmm.
into YouTube analytics right now, but like, or SEO. Let's move on to your second favorite, which I think is a bold take
I don't
considering
care.
who's available.
I love these guys, so I've this is internal bias. I'm well aware. I've picked VirtusPro, and if you've followed the show for a while, I feel like I've picked these guys every opportunity I have because I believe in Jame and I believe in the VirtusPro ethos. As much as people hate it, they don't like the way they play. Blah blah blah. I'm tired. I'm tired of you being tired of these guys playing Counter Strike. Um, they play very legit. The reacquisition of Norbert into the roster has honestly from the get go looked great. Guy takes space, creates opportunities for Fame, Flit. Jame himself is like a top 10 AWPer in the world, and that's maybe being a little bit almost too generous to him. He might even be top 5. The guy legitimately plays great Counter Strike, plays a very different brand of Counter Strike to other teams, and also just constantly makes threats with this roster. Like they've always been a very solid gatekeeper and also under almost weirdly underdog going into tournaments because they actually don't get as many opportunities as some of the others in the circuit to showcase what they can do against top level teams. But when they do, like every team is worried about falling to VirtusPro. They have legitimately created an aura of fear around them, even when even though you're sort of seldom put in a position where you have to face them. Now that they're here at the major, I have faith, and I fully believe that this roster will pull it together.
VirtusPro are my favorite team on paper because I like the calling style of Jane. I like a lot of the pieces on the team. I think Flit's an underrated rifler. I think I had him like number 8 or number 7 in my like rifle power ranking a few weeks ago. I think he's really good. Norbert looks like currently on form, I guess you could say, the best support in the world. And I think Fame has got great mechanics and he's really well utilized. And then Mir's a bit of a difficult piece to really place in terms of how I conceptualize him, but he does his job to a good enough degree. The problem I then have is when I actually look at when they play and how they play, like results wise, it's a little more sketchy. I made this point with, I believe, Vitality, as in who have they beaten. I've been making that VirtusPro point all year. All year. I struggle to have real confidence in them. Their best series did come in the PGL RMR, where they beat Na'Vi 2-0. Excellent. But aside from that, it's kind of a list of no one. They managed to lose best of threes to Gamer Legion and Cloud9 in Katowice. They've beaten teams like Big and Cloud9 in Blast. This is just not very impressive. This is the part where I give you a lot of credit, though. This is the right time to pick them. It's a group stage. It's triple elim, pretty much. Like, you can lose 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
The odds of them doing that before they win 3 are incredibly low. So, yeah, fair enough. They're going to make it through. Once we get to the playoffs, if they're there, which they should be, it's going to be a lot harder to justify picking them, considering who they've managed to lose best of 3s against and who they've managed to win a best of 3 against. Like, there's not a long list of good teams that they've beaten. There's quite a decent list of mediocre rosters who've been able to upset them. So I'm not too confident in VirtusPro, but I think they're good enough for this section.
I think the only 2 teams that you pull of note are Cloud9 and Gamer Legion. I do think you're maybe underselling them a bit because Cloud9. Listen, I'm not happy about it either, but they are actually playing some pretty like solid
They don't have an
foundational.
AWPer.
I know they're playing, but they're playing pretty solid foundational Counter Strike, and sometimes Boomich is actually calling some great T sides. So even if they're AWP absent in a lot of ways, like I do think it's maybe underselling them, and also Gamer Legion are probably like the most prep heavy anti-strat top level team in the circuit.
Yeah,
Even
but
though they play with underperforming parts, I think they actually just they actually outbrain them. Like I genuinely believe they come in with like better game plans than some teams, and teams aren't ready for the Gamer Legion to be like, okay, so we looked at them and they did X, Y, Z, and now they're doing A, B, C instead. Like what is going on? Like they're playing completely different to what we prepared for, and I think that throws teams off. I think it throws VirtusPro off. I think it throws FaZe off. You know, FaZe are also one of those teams that have lost to Gamer Legion pretty consistently, weirdly, in their tournament runs against them. So
The one issue with that is that, yeah, I mean, the Game Legion loss, I consider Game Legion a very different team on day 1 and day 2. They lost them on day 2. So at that point, I'm like, there's no excuse. That's an L. Okay. That's an L. I'm sorry. Like, they didn't come in with 2 weeks of prep on you. They got overnight and beat you. Like, you got out-aimed to a certain extent. You got out-skilled to a certain extent. So I was kind of disappointed in that loss, and I'll still count it as an L. Before we move on to underdogs, we've got some favourites to talk about because they weren't picked. Now, the first one, the biggest name just on brand value alone, is G2. Neither one of us has picked them as a favourite to go through. Now, I've picked 2 teams ranked ahead of them. Thus, I'm letting you lead on why you haven't picked them, because you did say you love VirtusPro, love all this crap. Why not G2? What's holding you back from loving this team?
Oh, I love Modesty.
Okay.
And to be honest, Nico sometimes.
Nico sometimes.
I think unfortunately, like the run in 2024 just feels like Modesty is doing so much to like boost this roster that if and I don't think this will happen, but if Modesty did have a dip in form, I think G2 would honestly just look god awful. I feel like Modesty is creating so much space and opportunity for this team to sort of operate underneath him as the youngest person on the team. Like that's to me kind of crazy, and I almost feel like I can't have faith in G2 in the long term. I'm sure they're fine coming out of this stage, but I do just worry that this roster move that they've made, or I guess sometimes even maybe the absence of roster moves, has been a little worrying for me, like backing this team, because there's only so long you can retain like high level and high output stars that are winning you games before, not if you're not getting trophies alongside it, like you sometimes will be able to retain those guys. Like there might be offers coming from other organizations trying to pick apart your project with what little you have left. Like I'm legitimately concerned because I don't see enough out of the core of this roster to be inspired by the performances.
Yeah, so I've already ragged on this team's decision to bring in Nexa the IGL and not make him an IGL, and instead try to have him as Nexa the Fragger, which is just mind-blowing. But the bigger issue for me, let's put it this way, Hunter has been subpar, and it's for 2 reasons. Firstly, he's just not on it mechanically. He's not looked up to snuff. He's just either he's not training or overtraining or some kind of wrist issue. I don't know what it is, but he just doesn't seem that sharp. And then secondly, he seems to have little to no synergy with Nexa. In terms of the plays he's trying to make, the way they're trying to set him up, it's just not functioning. There's clearly an issue there. So I think this team is limited for as long as you can't get Nexa. Because if you look at most teams' rosters and think you have 2 players averaging the numbers Monesi and even Nico are averaging this year. Monesi's putting up ridiculous stats. So 1.39 rating. I think both he and Nico actually had a 1.5 at the last event they played. But before that, it's just been Monesi. So Modesty is not a problem. That's crazy levels of output. Nico 1.22 on a rifle, I believe it is this year. Pretty nuts. Again, if you have these 2 on your team, it shouldn't take a whole lot more to get you over the line to be an elite team and to get consistency in your roster. But the rest has been so abysmal. I mean, we already know Hooksy's not going to shoot anyone. But the fact that Nexa and Hunter as a duo are both like on the similar numbers, I believe it is, and it's below a 1.0, you've got a real problem. You've got a real problem. You can't have that terrible of an anchor in terms of 3 players just dragging you back down. So I think they need to sort out whatever problems Hunter's having, and if that means just cut him and get someone who actually shoot someone, do it, because they cannot have these 2 players trying to carry such a weight whilst having those 3 practically AFK. You need more. And if it's not working in terms of fragging, it needs to be better with chemistry, synergy, something, and there's clearly that lacking too. So I think there's a massive problem there.
But the vibes behind the scene have improved, apparently.
The vibes. I don't care about
the vibes have been allegedly they have improved. Also, I will say, I would make the counter argument that like Hunter didn't look like this when they had JKS. You know, if Nexa has come in and Hunter is, you know, struggling to
Worse.
find some cohesion
Yeah.
and performing worse, I think you look at the cause and don't get rid of the, you know, just because you've got an injury doesn't mean you need to sever the whole leg. So I'd like to see Hunter given more time, because I always felt like he was like an underrated piece on this G2 roster when they were actually still like a comfortable top level team. Um, and now it just feels like they just fueled all the haters. Like they see Hunter now and they're like, yeah, actually, get rid of him. So
Yeah, when they were a good team, it wasn't like even before they had Munacy, it was always Nico gets the headline, Nico puts up the 1.3, gets the MVP. But then you got Hunter giving you like on a good to great event, like over a 1.15. He's fragging a lot. He's finding a lot of impact. He's making a lot of good decisions. And then on the other off days, he's slightly below that, but he's still well above the level he's at now. And then when you added Munacy, that's why we end up seeing they win 2 events last year, like the 2 biggest. And that was amazing. And that's partly because they had 3 players who were capable of delivering match-winning impact. Right now they've got 2, and sure, one of them stepped up massively. But that's just not enough. If you've got 3 players who consistently let you down, it's not enough. So I do agree that the solution isn't to cut Hunter. That's not my implication. My implication is to figure out what's going wrong with Hunter and to cut Nexa. That's the cut I'm trying to make.
I see.
I'm not trying to keep 2 IGLs on the goddamn team. Like, I do not want this. Because Nexa, as much as he might claim he's a lurker or he's a support player or he's any kind of non-IGL, I don't want him on a tier 1 team. If that's not what he's doing, I don't think he's good enough. Quite simply. And unless we're talking like a fringe, like maybe on a Monty, he can go be a player. But he's on G2. This has got to be a championship level tier 1 team. So I don't agree with his addition. I said that enough times. And I think if this continues, it has to be him to be cut.
Yeah. Okay.
The other team, which I thought was a bit weird that, well, you didn't take, Mouse. Now you kind of alluded to that they're not the kind of team you want to pick. What don't you like about them? What is there not to like about them?
I just like, first off, the fact that Brolin has integrated so like seamlessly into Mouse and actually having like a kind of a renaissance in his career, like performance wise, is kind of strange to me. And maybe that's just more credit to like coaching staff and in-game leading and, you know, making him feel comfortable. Because I don't know, I can't fall into the honeymoon or fall into the fantasy that Berlin is back in his entirety. I just can't do it to myself. I just feel like coming into this stage, I think this might be the first event I see out of Berlin where he looks uncomfortable again. Um, that's just, you know, that's just this is based on complete intuition and probably wrong. I don't know, but I think he's looked like he's improving from event to event in terms of like his role on the roster. I just I have doubts. I have significant doubts because I think Berlin is needed for this team to look good enough. Because the floor on this team is great, actually. I think the floor is perfect. But I do think they need somebody that is able to engage past that floor a bit via someone like Berlin or Frozen before him. And right now they don't have that. I don't think they have that completely in the back pocket that they can totally rely on. I think it's just been too early in the journey for me to be totally encapsulated by the Brolin move on this Miles roster. Even though I think they've legitimately looked good. So
Okay, so your reason for not picking them is despite them looking good and playing good, it can't be good.
It's too good to be true. Listen, let me like I can have my cognitive dissonance about VirtusPro. I can have that.
Yeah.
And I can choose to ignore Mouse in favor of a Vitality that have also, you know,
Done shit all.
been a bit and VirtusPro has been a bit but yeah,
No, no.
I just
Okay.
think as much as I like individual pieces on this team, it just I don't think I've seen them put through enough strife. You know, they're too young and they're too and this move is a little too fresh for me still. That yeah, I have my concerns. They're not like a comfortable team. They'll either go 3-0 or they'll like, to me, maybe even scrape 2-3.
Okay. Well, they are kind of who I was going to lean on to go 3-0 in my picks. And for the only reason, really, because making the 3-0 pick is tough right now, is because I think their opening matchup is a breeze. And I think they're one of the few teams of the top 4, or top 8 even, who have the necessary stars to just win a best of one that doesn't go their way, where they're not prepped. They have enough players who to like go, oh shit, one of you needs to do it. We've got 4 rolls of the dice. 4 of them could have a magical round. 4 of them could have magical moments. Rather than just a lot of teams, it's like you line on 2 guys, and if 2 of them, those 2 don't wake up on the right side of the bed, they don't bail you out when everything goes wrong, you're not going to win the best of ones. But I think these guys have enough. So that's why I'd pick them. I also think...
Don't they play Spirit in the 3-0? Like, if things go...
I don't know what the actual seeding looks like.
Yeah,
I mean, they're the number 4 seed. Spirit the number 2 seed. So if all the favorites win, I believe they should play FaZe.
I think they play Mouse. Or I think Spirit play Mouse.
No, but I think that's it. Hang on, let me just stick it in the fucking simulator.
No, I'm looking at all the like, if all favorites win.
Yeah, no, they play the 1 seed. They play FaZe.
Oh yes. Oh, sorry. It's only if Eternal Fire win versus Vitality that it all throws it out for a whack.
Yeah, so if there's upsets, things go out whack. But even then, if that's assuming that's the only upset. And remember, if Vitality go down and they lose another best of one, all of a sudden the seeding changes again. I wouldn't be so sure that everything is going to play out exactly like that. So, just on the balance of probabilities, I'd say they're the most comfortable 3-0 pick for me. You look at the guys. Roland can win you a map. Sorry, I'm just blanking on his name. Xerxin can win you a map. Torji, as rare as it is, can win you a map. YouM3 is so good, despite his roles, he can win you a map. So everything makes sense. And hell, Shuei's calling and his game sense can win you at least a good chunk around. So I'm not too worried about Mouse. I just think for me, I had better choices. For you, I don't want to criticize you too much.
I had better choices. I had better.
I'll keep taking the dubs.
Listen, I don't care if I lose. I've accepted my fate. I've gone through several stages of grief with the Pickems already. That I've reached acceptance in all things. In fact, so
yeah, we'll see how that goes. But let's move on to the underdogs. The more, I think, it's easier discussion to have because we're basically just going, this stuff's nice, but we'll see. Like we don't really.
Yeah, it's a little too speculative because also all the favorites that we've mentioned have also not been playing on the setups, have also not acclimated, maybe in the same way that some of these other teams have slowly, gotten used to their environment and the sort. So
yeah, the Romanian air quality,
Yeah, there's
is this part in Copenhagen? I don't know. Like, how are we actually doing this?
It is in Copenhagen, I believe. So
the air quality is not going to be an issue, just statistically. But let's move on to my first underdog pick. And I've picked, almost the Hoden team. It's Heroic.
The fake Danes. Fake.
Yeah, the fake Danish team. They made it out of the opening stage comfortably 3-0. A bit of a tight game against Imperial, who are playing. Technically, a lot of the stuff is nice, is good, is quality, but then a lot of the stuff is just Brazilian online CS at times, like just walking through smokes, no rhyme or reason, doing stuff that I don't really like. It's just that so much of their game is fundamentally sound when it comes to a lot of the trading, spacing, and the fact that their players are so skilled. It doesn't really matter that occasionally they take a gamble. It also doesn't help. A lot of the games I've watched, the gambles they're taking are working. They're making the right reads in these moments. So screw it. They're playing good Counter-Strike, it's just true. But Heroic, I believe, they beat them. They're the best team that came out of this opening stage. They still look comfortable. They shouldn't be considered, I think, on par with a lot of the teams they were playing in that opening stage. They were clearly a tier above, and I still see them as that in this stage. The only real question mark maybe would be like a complexity, someone else who's actually played a lot of tier 1 events, not in the recent memory. But Heroic, I think, are on equal footing pretty much with everyone from 5 to 8 in the seeds. I think they're on that sort of level, and so they're a great pick for an underdog. I'm not sure who they play in their opening game. I actually haven't looked into that deep into the matchups. They do open against FaZe, so they've got a rough opening BO1, but I think beyond that point, they're then matched up again with these level of teams they should be beating, and I think they got a good chance to squeeze out a 3-2 victory.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna say much poor about Heroic really. I think I said it before, like Heroic, I've been weirdly more impressed with like Tessus and Shush in
Oh
terms
yeah.
of like winning rounds. Nert's signed as like a star player, but he's not even really like the focal point for me on this team anymore, which is weird. It's a bit sort of like staggering because I rated him as such a high output rifler, and like obviously his mechanics are still fine. Like it doesn't look like eye test wise he's gone down, but it feels like he's lost a bit of the feel for like how rounds are developing, and that's maybe just to be anticipated with like a newer project. And I think it's probably a bit looser to a certain extent, like how they're calling.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, no, I don't really have much bad to say. Like I think I've had an improvement in my stock of Kicksan as time has gone on, because I
Oh
think
yeah.
the main critique for Heroic and Kicksan coming into this roster is that like this is basically the first time he's had to like work with a brand new roster, like no foundation to lean back on,
Yeah.
no sort of previous structure to rely on. He has to effectively bring all these different pieces together and make it work, and it's working. So I don't really have a lot of negative criticism, to be
No,
honest.
no. I mean, if I want to make my bad points against them, I can. I think Nikodosis look horrible. He had one good
He,
map in their four they played to get to this point, but the other three were pretty tragic. Uh,
But I think Nikodas has always been a bit like washy.
no, he's been up and down, but he's been very down
Hmm.
recently on this heroic roster, and I think that's been an issue. He looks better on a rifle. His orb is very inconsistent, and most of the time it's not good. He's more on the downside because on the upside, yeah, we've seen him in the past on like the Copenhagen Flames roster on other teams where he's really explosive with it, and that's really positive. But on this team, he just looks weak. So that's my biggest weakness for the team. I think the rifle core is amazing. I mean, as you said, Nerds hasn't been as big a focal point. I think for us who are looking for the talking points of this roster, what's actually really working, surprising. But despite that, he's still like pretty much leads the team in rating, leads the team in fragging. He's doing what you want your star rifler to do. So everything makes sense. And even Kicksan had some great numbers, I think, coming out of
Mhm.
the opening stage. So the combination they're calling and fragging has been working. It's just their AWP's the weakness for me. He's a clear weakness, and I think that's the biggest question mark going into the rest of the event. But aside from that, very happy with them. Let's move on to your first underdog pick.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like all my picks are a little bit.
I was wondering what's going on in your underdog picks. I'm going to be honest.
The thing is, I don't know that I could pick. Okay, I did also notice that we're also picking the highest rated or the highest ranked teams outside of the favorites category, and just going with that. And it felt like I don't know that I necessarily believe HLTV ranking to dictate my life like that. I think we have.
Would you have Cloud9 instead of Heroic in the underdogs? Is that what you're saying? Like,
I mean, if they categorized, but they don't. I don't think.
no. But what I'm saying is, if you drop Cloud9 into the underdogs, someone becomes a favorite. Like the favorites of the top eights is how we pick. So like, if HLTV rankings wrong, who has to be above Cloud9? Who's better than Cloud9?
No, I'm not saying I didn't want to pick based on HLTV. I just refuse. Um, okay, listen, I'm just gonna stop dancing around. I've done it with Eternal Fire. These guys were someone that I wanted to pick as 3-0. I felt like they were riding good momentum coming into this event. Same with Saw, to be honest. But Eternal Fire actually finished the job and got through to
Yeah.
the next stage, and Saw did not. Unfortunately, I think for these teams that are so much more inexperienced, like Soul definitely don't have a lot of experience as a roster. Eternal Fire actually were able to accrue quite a bit of LAN experience towards the end of last year, and have honestly just been improving event to event. So I I think Eternal Fire are back. Like the Turkish scene is kind of back, and they've got a front runner and a warrior that they can look at. Woxic has looked great in certain moments. I think Centaurez is, I mean, he's just Centaurez. Their opening game against Vitality, I think, is very upsettable as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been honestly kind of impressed with Calyx on the team. I felt like everybody that touched the Envy project way back in the day
Oh
was just sort of
God.
destined to die a slow career death.
That's a
But Calyx,
throwback right there.
but Calyx is
Tragic
kind of
throwback.
but Calyx is kind of back. So
Yeah.
I'm honestly happy for these Eternal Flower guys. You know, I think I've been very critical of them before because nobody could figure out their roles, and you know everyone's in-game leading and nobody's trying to win rounds. Almost like they're playing for their own stats and merit. They feel like a proper rehearsed team now. Um,
Hmm.
I like what I see. You know, this could have been a Mouse. Like I feel like if Mouse were in the same sphere as an Eternal Fire, I'd very happily pick both those teams. Um,
Mouse.
yeah, that's right.
Underdog.
I'm making a comparison to Mouse. I've gone back
Okay.
to it. I don't care how unhinged it is. Mouse
That's
are
crazy, but
underdogs in
yeah.
the favorite category.
No, okay. No. I can't really disagree with anything you've said about Eternal Fire. It's all correct. For me, one of the things that actually always bugged me, or irked me, however you want to put it, is that when I saw them in big games, I felt like I wasn't getting superstars Antares. It always felt like in the biggest game, my match winner was Wakadia. Uh, at least in the most not like the last sort of month or so, but before then, it always felt like I didn't get enough out of Antares in the biggest games, and that changed at this opening stage. Like he was immense in the maps they needed to win. He actually had a bit of a slow start from what I remember, but he got rolling and then rolled over some people. So that was great to see. It wasn't like a boom or bust sort of Wicadia win condition because he takes a lot of opening fights. You know, he's not going to be a consistent piece because Xantares has taken a bit of a step back in that sense. Because he used to be heavy on the openings, but now he's not, and that's brought a lot of consistency in terms of the opportunities he gets. But him converting them was the problem. Here he's converted them consistently, and I was a huge fan of what I saw. I do think Woxic's a bit of a liability. I've seen him have too many bad maps for me to truly trust him as if I'm picking the team. I'm not going to say it's because of Woxic. I do specifically remember against Heroic, him versus Nikodos for a large part of Mirage was who can miss the most shots. It was horrifying. It
Yeah.
was terrible. And I feel like I get too many of those maps from Woxic. But aside from that, I agree, Calyx, amazing how he's managed to resurrect himself. He's really become an amazing support player for them. Major doesn't frag, but he calls good enough for this team to really hold them together. And I think the star pieces are performing to a level that has carried them to this point. Making it past this stage, very possible if they get the right scenario. It's a bit like that in the Swiss system when you're an underdog. If you win your best of ones, you know, you do your upsets and you hope that someone else has managed to hold up their end of the bargain and the underdog sort of posse and like upset some people as well, so you get an easier 2-0 matchup, and then you can get through on a BO3. Then I think it's possible. I struggle to see them to be one of those teams that like loses their opening best of one, then has to grind back against this level of opposition. But they have the players for it. That can't be said. I can't say against that. Xantares is giving you the best form Xantares. You can actually do it. With a combination of an on-form Woxic, Wakadia finding openings, you can actually do it. I just think, yeah, it's a bit more of a long shot than a lot of the other, not a lot, but than some of the other teams that we've actually seen in the favourite section, for example.
Yeah, I think for this stage, I think they can make playoffs, but I think they're also I think when they get to playoffs, they will struggle.
Okay.
I do think they're one of those teams that to me are just not prepared to be in that kind of environment where you know
Yeah.
there's a crowd. You know, it's been a long time since any of these players have played in front of a crowd,
Yeah.
and to me, I feel like you're going to see people regress, unfortunately, when you get to that kind of a stage. But I think studio environment, LAN, they're they're fine to play in this type of event. Um, and I do think, yeah, unfortunately, Woxic can have his maps where he does look like he should just be rifling instead. As I think, unfortunately, quite a few oppers in this stage are maybe in the same category. But I don't know. I feel like you get sometimes like honestly surprise rounds out of major,
Yeah. I'm not
and
sure
then
what it's
you
supposed to be, but I keep hearing people
and
say
then
measure. So.
And then Wicadia, I don't know. He's not this flawless prospect that people are like rookie that people were sort of touting at the start of his
No.
journey with Eternal Fire, but he is. I mean, he makes a lot of good decisions. I think you know it's not just his like mechanics. He does make a lot of good decisions, and it's only gotten better as he's played more like difficult opponents. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm maybe just a bit of a romantic here. I like the project and the prospect of them doing well at this event.
You know, it's a better pick than, well, obviously, like, everyone who's from Mongols, Imperial, Ecstatic, Pain, like, yeah, you're not going to pick them. It just makes no sense. I think in that sense, it's a good pick. I think Wicadia was the decision making thing is interesting because it's just they tested him. They trialed like Dougie versus some of the other guys in the Eternal Fire Academy when they were trying to make this roster and find their final form. And I think it's clear that they realized he was the most polished and the most sensible, considering how chaotic and nonsensical that Academy side played. He was the most stable of the lot. And then, yeah, they put him in his right role. Sure, that means they had to eventually, like, they had to cycle off. Oh, what was the big lad's name? Who did some AWPing, did some calling, did some open entrying. He was huge, literally huge. Imor. He's massive. He's like 7 foot. The dude's so big.
I didn't actually know he was that big. To be fair,
huge. I'm not trying to make a joke. He's actually just a massive guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, because Imor Xantares was the original like opening kill kind of duo on this roster that just blew people away on certain maps. Like when this roster first came together, I watched some Imor demos from his games, and it was just W key headshot people. It was actually insulting to opponents, but it worked. But it wasn't going to be sustainable at all. So the fact that they found this guy to use as an actual entry, not just puggy nonsense, and it's slowly integrated, yeah, that's made them a far better team, and yeah, we've seen a far more consistent level than we've ever expected from a Turkish side. My second underdog, to wrap it all up, a team I often criticize, and I think I have very valid reasons to criticize them, because they often play poorly and make terrible decisions with their roster. But they made a great one towards the end of last year in signing Elige. And since then, well, they had a bit of a peak, like a sort of pinnacle for North American CS. I think there hadn't been much hope for many years, but they managed to actually finish second at a real event, which to them was crazy. Sure, since then they've been complexity. They lost in Atlanta to Mongols. They weren't very good at the last spring groups, and at Katowice they didn't have much luck in terms of the draw and their games, but they beat Liquid to get here. They've shown us with the right form and prep into an event that they can actually go deep unexpectedly. We have precedent for them to make an upset run. Yeah, that's about it. We're reaching when it comes to the rest of these underdogs, I'm going to be honest. Complexity haven't been convincing recently, like literally the last like 2-3 months. But in CS2 in general, they've had moments. Elige is still, even in their losses, one of the best riflers in the world. I think they've got what it takes to make the upset run happen here. I think they're the second best underdog team to pick. It's very cynical. It's not romantic. It's not romantic. It's not waxing poetic like you would about Xantares' Eternal Fire. But hey, it's cold hard logic. They've done upset runs before. Here they come again.
Yeah. Sydney. That's about it. That's all we've got, really.
Hey, it's more than VirtusPro.
That is... yeah, I mean, maybe. They don't get invited to those types of events, you know? They make it like that. Yeah. Holzerk's my big problem.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And JT is my big problem. Like, when they made that Sydney run, JT was having the event of his life. Honestly, towards the end of last year, JT looked incredible in almost every one of their officials and was really putting numbers that you wouldn't expect an in-game leader to do, let alone JT as well. Which I think artificially propped up how good this team is. I do agree, Elige is sick. And I think, honestly, Holzerk's output in some games isn't terrible. But I feel like you need that this guy just closes off.
Hold off on the flattery.
Listen,
in some games he isn't terrible.
Yeah. I feel like this guy locks off, like, there's like 9 doors to his heart, and he locks off all of them until, you know, every so often, like, every 9 games, one door unlocks, or all the doors unlock, sorry. And he's actually able to play Counter-Strike that's, like, explosive and fun, and he's able to get, like, multi-kills in rounds. Like, I get tired of watching Holzerk play on this team because I feel like he's almost not doing enough. It's kind of like my angle for Hades on Ents, to be honest. Like, sometimes he does pull rounds back into contention, I think Hades is better at it than Holzerk is by a mile.
To give him
But
credit,
I think Holzerk does sometimes recover rounds just because of how slow he plays out scenarios. And then, on the odd occasion, like the Sydney finals, you'll get Holzerk just running at people and like triple kill AWPing them, and you're just thinking, where is this any other time that he has like a big game to play?
Yeah.
It almost felt like he'd given up and just was just throwing caution to the wind, and it worked. I feel like that's what you need out of Holzerk. So yeah, complexity. Yeah, I would not have picked them.
No, clearly you had the opportunity to, and you didn't, because
Yeah.
they're technically higher rated by our city ranking, HTV ranking, than Eternal Fire. So you clearly had reasons not to pick them.
I'd rather pick the unproven that have potential than the proven to not have potential.
Okay, but here's the thing: they made it through the Americas RMR with Floppy playing like absolute dog do, and according to everyone with a silly accent, he's the next god of the game. And I can't help but get annoyed at how much I get told about him. And this may no longer even be true, because it's been like 2 years since he's been at the top and mid, and maybe people have fallen off in terms of their love for this guy. But hey, if the Floppy that everyone promised me comes out, all of a sudden, it doesn't matter how mid Holzerk is. It doesn't matter. They got another star.
Yeah.
Another real elite star.
I mean, Grim also was missing for quite a few of their games. It was just kind of like an Elige carry performance. It was genuinely like an Elige. Like in their game against Furia, it was actually astounding. It was Elige versus all the stars on Furia activating at different points in the series, which was just wild.
Yeah, Elige deserves so much credit for getting this team here. It's actually incredible. And he deserves so much credit for like coming into CS2 and reinventing himself. Not in terms of like different roles or anything, but just, I think reinvent is the wrong word. Resurrecting his career. Again, like we said for Calix, but on a much grander scale. Because he didn't get cut from Liquid unjustly. He was poor. So the fact that he's come to Complexity, and then even with CS2 launching, gone even harder, been the guy who's prepped, been the guy who's been able to keep his level and get better, deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people outside looking in, were basically saying, "Oh, Elige does seem like a kind of a tough person to work with, but he's putting up good numbers, and it's to a certain degree you can give leeway to star players being a bit
obtuse,
a bit unpersonable. Yeah, obtuse maybe the right term. I don't know. Yeah, you might forgive that a little bit more when they're actually giving output. And I mean, I always thought that when he joined Complexity, it was like a good humbling experience for him. He'd been with Liquid for such a long time and felt like he maybe was the captain of the ship. He still has shares in Liquid, by the way, but we don't care about that much apparently. Yeah. So yeah, no, I mean, shout out to Liege. Guy definitely is still a star level player, and he brings like a leadership aspect to this team, which is nice.
I mean, really, he's a superstar level player right now. Like, he's actually one of the very few best players in the world. So yeah, he deserves it to get the credit for this team being somewhere. Because without him, bloody hell, it's an ugly fucking look, isn't it? It's a grim existence. But let's close out the show. Who have you got as your final underdog? Because you took some time to pick them. You pondered, you ummed, you ahed. I'm sure you slammed your fist into the table a few times. Who have you ended up selecting?
I don't know how to introduce these guys, but I did pick them in the last stage as well to make it through. And I'm picking them again. Imperial. I think I stand by this. I think they are a much more complete looking team and a better team than Furia within the South American region. They might have, they struggled in much the same way that Furia did, and I think they beat harder teams in theory to get here. Yeah, this Imperial team has a lot of firepower. Genuinely has a lot of stopping power, and they don't play like heavily over the top chaotic South American Counter Strike. Yes, there are a couple rounds where people are pushing through smokes, maybe unjustly, and maybe a little bit,
maybe some gambles.
Yeah, making tough choices in not so difficult scenarios. I do think that this team has enough like variance in the style that they play that they can beat basically anyone, but they can also in to a certain extent lose to almost anyone as well. I think Phelps and Henny are good enough to bring you past some of those games, even if the calling is a little whack. And also, I just love that there's another force in Brazil that we can look at. You know, because the Imperial Last Dance was just kind of a joke to me. Like,
Oh
I'd
yeah.
never treated that team seriously, but I think Imperial have some prospect of actually creating a little bit of a, not a dynasty, but you know, they've got a bit of a threat level about them when they enter tournaments like this now. And they were severely underrated into this event. So I mean, I love backing a bit of an underdog. Backed them in the previous stage as well because I like what I see so far. You know, I think Descenti and No Way, you know, definitely the most unproven pieces on this roster, don't get the I think are mainly getting the credit now that we've seen what they output in this type of environment. But if that's the people that you have behind Henny and Phelps, then you know you've got 4 players that can pop off in a game.
Yeah. They are looking ready to establish themselves as an actual team, like a Brazilian team we can actually look forward to watching more than, once a year when their partnership gets them into an event. KOF Furia, like they actually look like they can qualify for events and be kind of relevant at them. That's the level they showed us at least so far. I was most impressed with. It is No Way the guy who was a streamer, right?
Yes, No Way, young streamer, been in no team before this.
Yeah, he's really impressed me. Like, I looked at the numbers, they're not that impressive, but when I watched the actual games, I was like, yeah, he's making key pushes, key frags. Like, sure, again, some of them are a bit silly, but most of the time when he's taking those risks, he's doing it with Henny over his shoulder. You know, it's a coordinated push, or he's doing this stuff that actually is fairly fundamental, even if it is sometimes a little risky. So I've actually kind of liked watching him. I immediately, when I saw him playing, I watched a few rounds and just went on HTVs like, is this guy under 20? Like, could he be in prospects? It'd be difficult if they don't make it through this, if they make it through this part of the event, to treat him as like some unknown young prodigy. But he is fairly impressive, so I've liked watching him specifically. I've made it clear earlier in this very recording that I was, a bit iffy on some of the plays I saw them make through smokes, especially. But I do think this is a team that's worth taking a risk on. They are dangerous, and their high end, if everything's working, is pretty much as good as it can be. Like, they can make it out 3-0 if everything is just firing from the moment they start playing. If the confidence is there, they feel comfortable, they're on the right maps, they will just steamroll teams if it's all working perfectly. Obviously, it's a lot to ask, but that is the level of talent they have. I do believe they're a genuinely talented team. So, an interesting pick, the perfect kind of underdog pick to really wrap it up, because they are an underdog, they are fairly unknown, but they definitely have the potential to spark an upset. So, solid pick. But yeah, let's see how it pans out, because they are a boom or bust kind of roster, it feels like. So far, mostly boom, though.
Yeah, and also shout out Vinny. You know, I think Maui made a tweet about this as well. But like Vinny's just like, you see that man smile all the time when they're playing, and he just seems like he's just having a good time, and he's on. Maybe even he's surprised a little bit, like, oh my god, guys, we're just killing people, and I love it. You know, he just seems like very personable, very charismatic, nice little sort of say a mood boon for Imperial, even if times are tough. You know, Vinny as an in-game leader on this team, yeah, it's not the most structured Counter Strike, but
No.
nice to see that they're having a good time, they're enjoying themselves, and that he's not calling terribly either. You know, he's not calling a masterclass, but he's calling all right enough that
Yeah.
yeah, all this potential can sort of realize itself.
He's calling the right game for this team. That's, I
Yeah.
think, matters. Like, there's no point calling multi-layered nonsense with 1,000 different little micro adjustments. No, just play to your strengths. Like, these guys are going to hit shots. If they got a feeling, they got a vibe, they want to take a risk, let them. That's kind of the right way to call for this team. So far, he's been doing it. It's been working. They've made it this far. Let's see how far it takes them. So that pretty much wraps it up. I would dive into some of the underdogs, but I got a feeling we don't have too much nice to say about most of them, and we're coming up on the hour mark, and we started late, and I'm a little sick. So I think we're just going to wrap it up here.
The Mongols did it for Asian Counter Strike. That's it.
Mongols, let's go. Yeah, but like, yeah, I got the points for them. I picked them. They made it through 3-2. And I said it on Maui's stream. He was like, "You're not worried?" I was like, "No, they're going through 3-2. It's fine." And they did. So, way. Love it. But all right. Furious suck. That's the show. We'll see you in the next one for the actual playoffs.